The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today we will be answering listener emails from this gigantic email bag that we've had this week. We have a question from Mantu, who lives in Johannesburg, South Africa. And Mantu asks, Idan Alexander, the last Israeli-American hostage, has been released. It's reported that he is the last living hostage held by Hamas. Where do you think we go from here? With no hostages left, will Israel take off the gloves, as you guys have put it, and end Hamas? Scott? Mark?
So before we answer that question, I saw an item today in the newspaper, according to this was in the Jerusalem Post, that the Gaza Health Ministry, which originally reported that 70% of the fatalities in Gaza are women and children, quietly revised those figures, conceding that 72% of the dead are combat-aged men. I don't know if that matters to anybody out there, but the idea was, that all these civilians were getting caught up in this, and that the Israelis were just randomly shooting at people and not obeying their long-standing ways of warfare, and that this might indicate, it does to me, that that is not true, that they're fighting against Hamas, and that they're fighting to defeat an enemy that invaded their country on October 7th, 2023.
So where would such a gigantic shift come from? And I also saw in I don't remember, it was a news alert that the new head of Hamas had been targeted by Israel in his hospital bed. He's in a hospital somewhere. I don't know if I deleted that. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Where would such a gigantic change come from in percentage?
Well, I mean, it would seem to me that the idea there is that was disinformation, and that the health ministry is is part of the propaganda tools that they use to win the battle of public opinion. Not that I think Israel really cares about public opinion, but that they've changed that. They've changed that idea that there's indiscriminate killing, and that the rules of engagement have been violated, and that that's not the case. To answer the question, I'll just say this: I do think the gloves are off. I don't think it had much to do with that hostage, because I don't think that Bibi Netanyahu cared about those hostages. I think that Israel has long felt that anybody who gets taken hostage is, should be counted among the dead, and that they're not going to be negotiated for, and that they are from time to time, but that's an anomaly to their standard practice, not the standard practice. That the standard practice is that civilians or soldiers who are kidnapped are casualties of war, and they just move on. It was significant, I think, that the State Department and the ambassador from the U.S. to Israel closed down their Palestinian peacemaking office in Jerusalem, and that we're no longer engaged in a peacemaking effort that predates this hostage being released. I don't think it changes Israel's tactics, and I think that Trump walking away from Israel when it comes to the Houthis and Hamas is more of an indication that they're free to do whatever they want to do. The U.S. isn't going to be involved in it, but that the Israelis have a free hand to do what they need to do to safeguard their country, or however you want to put it.
It was Mohammed Sinwar, who's in a hospital in Gaza, apparently. I saw this on CNN.
Okay.
It says he was targeted in a strike on a hospital in southern Gaza Tuesday evening. It just says he was targeted. It doesn't say there was a strike, and he's the de facto leader after his brother was killed. He was targeted. It doesn't say anything else that I can see that he was killed. Okay, so then what do you see, Scott, if Israel has a clear pathway and an open invitation, right? In the meantime, here's Trump doing personal business with Qatar, who is apparently a supporter of Hamas, and of course other Muslim nations are not necessarily happy to see the Palestinian people wiped out or then moved en masse to wherever and turned into displaced people in refugee camps by Trump so that he can have whatever he wants in Gaza. Where do you see this whole thing moving as far as the whole region goes? I don't think this is going to make the region any more safe.
Well,
but I'm not a Middle East expert.
Yeah. So I mean, and neither am I. But what I do think is that Sinwar, whether he's dead or not, I don't think the article that I'm looking at doesn't know. But that he's one of the planners of October 7th, and that they had a target on him, and were trying to are trying to kill him, rather than have him be the person to make to make a peace deal or a ceasefire or anything like that with them. So look, I think this is going to be a little bizarre take on this, but I really think that what Trump wants more than anything right now is a Nobel Peace Prize, and that he'll do anything he has to do to get that Nobel Peace Prize. And if it means that he's got to accept an airplane from Qatar, or if it means that he's got to have the Saudi Arabians and the Israelis join the Abraham Accords and have a peace deal together, if it means that he's got to make deals with the Iranians, he's going to do whatever it takes to get that Nobel Prize, because that's what he wants more than anything. And I don't know where Israel stands on the peace deal, which would include, according to the Saudi Arabians, a Palestinian homeland next to Israel, right, in the West Bank and Gaza. Who runs it? Who is the security there? All of those details have not ever been worked out, but that was the idea. And if we go back to the September before the October attack in Israel by Hamas, Netanyahu had announced that deal at the UN. I'm sure kicking and screaming about it, but he did announce it and said that there's going to be peace in the Middle East, and that led directly to Hamas's attack. So they've got to eliminate Hamas first. They've done a pretty good job from what I've read. And again, I'm only reading this stuff. As far as Hezbollah in Lebanon is concerned, decimating their leadership, degrading their abilities to strike. They're doing the same thing in Gaza with Hamas, and they're going to do the same thing in Yemen with the Houthis. And then at that point, they can probably, from a major position of strength, try to make some kind of deal with Saudi Arabia and the other Arab countries to accommodate in some way the desire for the Palestinians to have their own state.
I think going back to one of the points that Scott made, I'm not sure that they knew this guy was still alive, first of all. And, with Scott's correct. They started to pull back before this, the United States. And I think this was more of a surprise than anything else. Why Hamas decided, if that is true, and that's only conjecture, if that is true, why Hamas decided to let him go and not kill him I don't know. There must be some reason involved into that. Maybe something to do with public opinion, although I don't think that that's going to really matter all that much. But yeah, I think that now the gloves are off, as we've said before. Israel's been kind of doing this with their hands behind their back, and yeah, I think now that they can go forward. I also think that Brooks' point about dealing with Qatar is an interesting development there. That's no friend of Israel either. Yes, they've been involved in some of these talks, but only because of their influence with some of with Hamas and some of the terrorist organizations that are there. So it is so convoluted as to who's on whose side. And I think Scott's correct. I think that the only reason Trump is even involved in any of this, because this is way too complex for his brain cell or two. The only reason he's involved is because he wants that Nobel Peace Prize, so he can put it down at Mar-a-Lago or whatever. And okay, if it comes out that we get peace and we get a two-state solution and all, okay, if that's the price we got to pay, one man's ego for this, I'm all right. I'll say fine. But the fact is that it is such a complex situation, especially when you look at all the different players that are involved into this. And now, sitting down and talking with Qatar and the deals that were being made just this week, as we speak with Qatar, going to Syria and making the very bizarre comment that their leader, who was a jihadist, their new leader was a jihadist, to say that he's a very handsome, and I mean that's kind of odd. But I mean, this is so much more complex than just. It's almost like Who's on First from the old Abbott Costello. It just keeps going around and around that we don't know who's on whose side anymore. And when those lines are that blurred, yeah, we're probably better off not getting involved. But just to get his Nobel Peace Prize, he'll stay involved to a point so that he can claim some credit for having done something. That'd be my thought on it.
Well, also, what we don't have are experts. I mean, look at Steve Witkoff running from Moscow and saying how great Putin is, to where else has he gone? He's gone to China. And my understanding of Xi is that the reason Xi did not come to Trump's inauguration was that President Xi felt it was an insult. And from Xi's perspective, to be sitting among many as though he were an equal at basically what he considered a barbaric ceremony, that is an insult to him. And I was thinking about that. Here we have Steve Witkoff, who knows nothing about any of these areas of um, of conflict or culture or history or anything else, going from Moscow to, I don't know, Israel to to then to China also. I would think that that would be an enormous insult to the Chinese, and possibly also quite amusing, I would think, to somebody like Putin, um, as well as disrespectful. And I don't know how the Israelis would feel, and I don't know where else Steve Witkoff is supposed to be going. But a person needs area experts for this. You don't take the same person who knows nothing about anything in international affairs and expect a person to negotiate with people who are top notch in their own nations and in the field of international negotiations, and expect a neophyte to get anywhere. I mean, the whole thing is ludicrous. And for Trump to go over and try to talk to these people himself,
Well,
it's
Brooke,
just
yeah,
mind-boggling to me.
I think you have to understand that Trump's not over there right now making peace deals. He's making deals. You know, this is the height of republicanism.
Yeah, on his
Um,
own behalf, right? Golf courses
yeah,
and
yeah.
whatever for himself.
I mean,
I'm sure. I
the
just,
list of CEOs and people that he brought with him over there is pretty remarkable. This is a businessman, let's call him, trying to use businessmen to make peace in the world as long as there's something in it for them. And that seems to be the motivation behind the Qataris, the Saudis, and the oligarchs here in the United States.
I did find a link to that. Is it Justin Walpers, the economist? And one thing that he pointed out that I think others are missing is that Trump is not a businessman. He is now president of the United States, and he needs to forget about, even if he were a legitimate businessman, which he certainly was never. He is not in that role now, and he needs to forget about that now. Now he is president of the United States. And so to still behave as though he were a private person or whatever he thinks he's doing, he is not behaving in the role that he was elected to do. And I appreciate Dr. Walpers pointing that out, because I think
Yeah,
people are forgetting that. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, well, just to build on that, I mean, you mentioned Steve Witkoff and how in over his head he is. From what I understand, he's a very, very smart businessman. He's a very good negotiator. And the idea that you can take a business negotiation, a guy who's used to dealing with realtors and making real estate deals, and bring them to a Vladimir Putin and have him negotiate with Vladimir Putin, it seems that if the reports are correct, and I haven't heard anybody refute them, that he's relying on Russian translators to translate into English for him. He doesn't have his own staff. He's not bringing diplomats with experience with him. It's almost like they've torn down the entire diplomatic efforts that have existed for decades and are instead trying to use the values of business to run a international relations unit, and and that he just seems to be in over his head because he's being told, for example, Vladimir Putin is very touched by what Trump has said about him, and all of these things. Like if you really take that kind of stuff seriously, I think you're doing yourself a great disservice and doing, more importantly, the country a great disservice because you're just not dealing with a full deck. These people are manipulative. They are professional liars. They're not dealing in any kind of good faith. And if Steve Witkoff is a person of good faith, he's likely being abused by them. And I always said the same thing about Trump. Trump has dealt with some bad men in his lives, right? He had to deal with the mob when he was a realtor in construction in New York. He had to deal with some pretty rough people, but I don't think he's ever had to deal with a Kim Jong Un before he went over there to deal with him, a guy who would murder members of his family and you know pretty much enslave his own people. Like that level of evil is just beyond the ken of a Donald Trump, as bad as I think Donald Trump is. And and these guys are coming off as really really naive when they're dealing with these, like, mass murderers who are now in charge of their countries. And you know, I mean, all you could do is say, God, but God bless you. I hope it works out. I don't think it will. I don't think that you're going to get a lasting peace there. But if you do, great. If you're correct, hey, history will smile on you, my friend. And I think that at that point, this is all we can really hope for, because there's nothing. This is the way they're doing it. They've thrown out diplomacy. Like Marco Rubio doesn't matter. He is the chief diplomat of the United States, and he is not involved in any of this, from what I can tell. They've got their own people. They're not diplomats, they're business people, and they're negotiating like these are business deals.
Yeah, and also, as I understand, when during Trump, the first time around, Trump was so busy calling President Xi for help with how he should deal with Kim Jong Un that finally President Xi said that he was not Trump's servant in being the one to give all this help, and that Trump should not personally be doing these types of talks. Somebody else should be, and that he wasn't going to be answering the phone anymore.
Right.
He wasn't. Yeah,
He was.
and
I'm not the Korea desk.
exactly,
We have people for
exactly.
that.
I mean, so but Trump hasn't learned anything. And that suggests to me that he's not going to learn anything now either, which is very troubling. And I'll try to find, it was foreign policy. I've mentioned this before in a much earlier podcast. I'll try to find it's an interview with Fiona Hill, who pointed out again that when Trump spoke with Putin, there was again only Russian translators from Putin's side, and that for people who understand fluent Russian, which she speaks herself, and who understand Russian culture, the translators were not translating exactly what Putin said when they told Trump what Putin said. And the translator and the other Russians were standing around smirking and being rude, but you'd have to be a Russia expert to know that, and you would have to have your own translator to know what was actually being said, and that in fact Trump was being greatly disrespected, and he didn't even know it. And again, as you say, with Witkoff's relying on Putin's translators, they're going to retouch what Putin actually does say, and that can be very well an inside joke among them. And who knows what Putin is actually saying and what the nonverbal communications actually are among the people who are there. And Witkoff believes it. He's got to have his own translators, his own diplomats, his own team.
Well, it just goes to show that the absolute I don't know, clown car
Yes,
that we've got running the country.
yes, and that alarms me as far as Israel and the whole Middle East. I mean, look how long these conflicts have been going on. Decades. What, over 100 years since Britain first took over that area and began to move people in, or they were fighting against the Israel. I don't even know, but it was a British territory, was it not? And there was fighting between the British and the Israelis, or the original Israelis and Palestinians who lived there. This has been going on for a very long time. And we are not just going to come bouncing in with Trump and fix it. And I agree with you, Scott. He does want a Nobel Peace Prize. That is absolutely what he wants.
Right. And the troubling thing there, I think, is that he'll do anything to get it.
Exactly.
And he'll make a bad deal to get it.
Exactly. He'll lie. He'll do whatever he has to do to get it.
But the part that, kind of makes you hold your breath a little bit is, as you point out, ordinary channels have not led to good solutions in this region. And so I think the theory there is maybe we should try a different approach altogether, and let's approach it like a business deal, not an international deal, and use the language of business and the values of business to get something done that we couldn't do diplomatically. And it's worth a try. Again, I don't think it's going to work, but if it does, how awesome, whatever it takes. I do know that when we were back at Nova, there was an altercation, one of many, between Pakistan and India, and that it was U.S. businessmen telling their counterparts over there that we're not going to be doing business with you guys if you're going to continue this kind of violence. And that's what got them to back down, which also seems to be the case in the most recent conflict between the two countries. That the private contractors, private companies, CEOs are the ones who are able to get through to the national leaders through business leaders there, to make peace, however tenuous it is, whereas diplomats were unable to do that. Again, I don't think it's going to work, but if it did, I would be very pleased.
Agreed. Okay.
Yeah, well, if it does, that would be wonderful. I don't know. I mean, if it were to do so, I don't know if Trump, with his attitude and his bullying and nastiness, use of force, and so on, is going to be the one to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess only time will tell.
Exactly.
He's lifted sanctions on Syria. They're thrilled. Are we going to get a good result of that, or are they going to turn around and use that to sponsor terrorism and things like that? At this point, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. We'll see. Thank you, as always, for staying with us. So I thank and appreciate all our listeners very much. We all do. And stay safe, everyone, and we will see you again next time on the Nova Society.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society. I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of NovaWorks, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description.